Hey traders, this is Blake Morrow with Trader Summit, and I have a very special guest with us today. I have Mr. Jayant Bhandari. He is a business consultant with a lot of companies that tend to want to do business in India, and he's worked with companies all across the spectrum. And let's bring him in because there's been a lot of news. Jayant, good to see you, by the way.
Thanks very much for having me here, Blake.
It's wonderful to have you. I remember the last time we had a conversation here on the Trader Summit, which was probably about 4 or 5 months ago. There have been a lot of rumblings about companies wanting to move their supply chain and doing more business in India. And over the course of the last several months, those rumblings have gotten a little bit louder and a little bit larger. And so I know you've seen all of the articles, but for traders that aren't really familiar with them, this is like one, for example, that was just on CNBC over the course of the last couple of weeks regarding what's happening with all of these surveys, a lot of CEOs wanting to make that move into India. And I wanted to get your continued thoughts on this process, because it seems to me, ties between US and China are getting more and more strained. CEOs are starting to see more risk evolve with the ability to do business with China. And India seems like that natural country to step in and fill the gap, if you will, for the US. So what are your thoughts about this current situation we're in?
Blake, I am in China next week. I go to China quite often, and I go to India quite often. I sent you, before our conversation started, I sent you the graph of the manufacturing sector of India. Indian manufacturing value added, and this is from the World Bank, has fallen continuously for the last 5 or 6 decades now as a proportion of GDP. It is currently 13%. At the same time, Chinese manufacturing value added is 27% of their GDP, which means that manufacturing is about 11 to 12 times as bigger in China as it is in India. Virtually all of manufacturing of India is for internal usages, whereas a majority of the Chinese manufacturing is oriented towards exports. There is no chance, just simply looking at the numbers, that India can ever take over what China contributes to manufacturing value added. So this is a myth. This is a dream concocted by people who don't really understand, who don't want to think over why India could not be China. And then suddenly they think that after 76 years of independence of India, India will suddenly start to have Chinese manufacturing come to India. Now, Blake, I fully understand that there are problems in China. When I'm in China next week, I will be worrying about whether I like Xi or I don't like Xi. I don't like his dictatorial policies. There are many things about Xi and CCP and China that I don't like. But at the same time, there are a lot of things about China that I like. The entrepreneurial spirit, the smoothness with which things happen in China, they impress me no end. The fact is that Xi has removed corruption to a large extent from the day-to-day activities of your life in China. Whereas in India, it's falling apart. There's corruption is rapidly growing in that country. Sadism is rapidly growing in that country. And India is an anti-meritocratic system. So the structure of government is getting worse by the day. So how is it that suddenly manufacturing is going to start shifting from China to India?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before we started filming, I posed the question to you, since you are truly a consultant for a lot of big companies that want to do business in India. Can you go through like the process of what it's like for let's say a US corporation? You got some CEO that wants to go visit India, thinks it's a great idea to move their operations from China to India. What's the experience like for them?
So, Blake, this is one big problem with a lot of companies. They firstly fly first class or business class to India, and a chauffeur-driven Mercedes comes over to the Delhi airport to take them to a top-class hotel in New Delhi. Now, this guy would have spent in a day what is more than the GDP per capita of India for a year. So, his experience is very colored by the luxurious traveling he would have done. Now, he comes to this five-star hotel. There are nice young girls walking around there, treating him like a god. Firstly, he's rich. The money, he's sweating money basically from the perspective of these people. So they treat him very, very well. But also remember, white skin, despite whether you like it or not, is treated extremely well around the world. So this guy has a very skewed, convoluted impression of India. He finds India extremely friendly, very good. Now he goes to an office in India. He's again very well treated. There's once in a while even a red carpet laid for him. He walks in. He's offered good tea and coffee. He's even sometimes taken to a buffet setup, just set up for him. So, he's treated so well. And then Indians promise him the heaven. And then, after 2 days in New Delhi, he returns back to the US and thinks what a glorious civilization India is, when he did not experience anything to do with India. And, when I ran a subsidiary of a Swiss company in India, I put my managing director through the same thing. And then I realized I had to change it. So I started sending him a non-air conditioned local car to pick him up and let him go through some of the meetings by himself. And that's when he started realizing what was actually happening. And this is what I seriously recommend people who want to really understand India, is to actually travel like the average Indian guy for a while and like really understand what is happening there.
So, okay. So now you decide as a CEO, I want to do business in India. I've got all my contacts set up. Now I'm going to start the process. What does that actually look like? What is promised versus what is delivered? And our times, our benchmarks met, so on and so forth.
So this is where the reality, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the reality hits him right away. He goes to the Indian High Commission. And because Indian High Commission people are habitual of meeting Europeans, tens of people on a daily basis, he immediately faces bureaucracy, chaos, and he is shown disrespect just in his first meeting at the Indian High Commission. So now he starts understanding what is happening in the country. He wants to go through the paperwork to do with investing in India. And, the lawyers come into the picture, and he realizes that things take forever to happen. The one underpinning principle to do with India is that everything, absolutely everything, requires a bribe. Now, an American guy does not really understand what is happening. He does not want to pay bribes, not just because of moral reasons, but he has legal reasons why he can't pay bribes. So it is usually the job of his lawyer to overcharge this company and siphon that an extra charge for bribery purposes. So this is what it starts happening. But depending on who this person is, how well he is connected, whether the recommendation flows down from the prime minister or not, all those things decide how soon he can start operating in the country. Now, what he sees when he comes to India is, when he starts looking at the numbers on his computer screen, is that the daily wages in India can be as low as $4 a day without any medical coverage, without any holidays, without anything at all. So he realizes that the cost of doing business is extremely low. seemingly based on his computer screen. But now he realizes that everything takes 100 or 50 times more time than it would in the United States. Bribe becomes a problem, frustration becomes a problem. People say one thing and do something completely different. Contracts have no value in India. You can sign a contract and almost invariably they will renege on the contract. They will come back and say, hey, we did sign the contract, but this is not what we thought about. So let's redo the contract a bit. So contracts are forever changeable. Workers have no skills. A lot of workers from India has moved to Hong Kong, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, etc., Bahrain. And that means that the skilled population is simply not in the country. If I need a plumber or electrician, Blake, in India, it is virtually impossible to find one. That is how difficult skilled labor is in India. In fact, so bad is the skilled labor in India that even if you go to Dubai and Saudi Arabia or Hong Kong, you realize that they now increasingly bring in people from other countries because the quality of work done by Indians is not at par with what they want.
So when you are dealing with these companies, whether they're in the US or, you know, what are European companies or whatever, how do you, as obviously you were you know, originally from, probably raised in India, how do you talk a company out of that and try to, you know, redirect them to different countries, or do you just really go through this very difficult process with them as much as they want to?
Well, you know, it's very simple. I don't always tell them not to invest in India, but in most cases, I do tell them not to invest there. But there are always reasons why you might want to invest in India. And then I simply go through with them what it means to do business in India. I help them process what they are seeing, because what they are seeing and hearing is not what the reality is. So I help them understand what is actually happening. And that is my contribution to their work. You know, there have been very successful operations in India. So whatever I said does not mean that nothing can make money in the country. It only means that you have to be very skeptical. You have to really understand what will work and what will not work in the country. But let's put it this way, 99% or 99.9% of opportunities that you hear about in India are not going to work out. Most of the multinational companies operating in India consistently, year after year, decade after decade, make losses.
Well, I think this is a really good episode, if you will, for US companies that want to do business in India moving forward. Because again, it seems like that's the tide, that's the trend right now of a lot of US based companies. So if you happen to be a company in the US and you wanted to consider moving some of your operations to India, I suspect that Jayant, you're probably one of the best people to talk to. What's the best way for people that are watching this video to get a hold of you, to follow your work and what you do?
Well, I have a website, jayantbhandari.com. Everything I do goes on it, and there's a way to contact me through my website.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, you do write some very interesting articles, and I know a lot of people look at your views and they're going to have, you know, some of them are going to be, you know, very upbeat about what you have to say. Some other aren't, but this is reality, is what you're truly dealing with. And I think that as an American businessman myself, I can appreciate that. And I'm sure most of your clients do as well. Jay, you did some research regarding some of these US based companies that said they're spending and investing all of this money into India. Tell us a little bit about what your findings were.
Well, Blake, I just went through some of the numbers, and these numbers come from Bloomberg and CNBC, and you know, these people talking very excitedly about what a massive investment Foxconn and Apple are doing in India. And, I tried to put those numbers into perspective. So I'm not saying anything that is different from what they have said, but they put a layer of emotions over those numbers. So Foxconn will have invested a total of $2.7 billion in India. They have invested close to 1.2 billion in India, and they have promised to invest 1.5. Always remember, what they claim they will do in the future is an unknown, because things can go wrong all the time in India. But remember, 2.7 billion is nothing. I see $2.7 billion getting invested in Congo, in Mongolia, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, and no one thinks about it. This is a petty amount of figure on what's happening in the world.
Yep.
And put that into perspective, 2.7 billion out of 3,000 billion, which is the market cap of Apple, is an insignificant amount of money. But moreover, remember that this might not be an economic decision in the first place. Apple was asked to invest in India to be able to legally sell in the country. So this might just be a political investment rather than an economic investment that Apple went through. And, last week, Prime Minister Modi was in a grand ceremony, which was claimed to be the biggest operation of Boeing outside the US. And this is what Prime Minister Modi said in his speech. I heard it yesterday. Now, I just want to put in, people can Google it and look for his speech, and they can also check the numbers I'm giving you. Boeing has invested a total of 1,600 crore rupees in the country. Now, this looks like a grand figure, but let me translate that Indian rupee number into US dollars. That comes to less than 200 million US dollar. Now, what is 200 million US dollar? 200 million US dollar is the price of half a 747. That is what Boeing has invested. And again, this might not have been an economic disinvestment. This is very likely a political investment, because Air India recently signed a contract to buy 220 planes from Boeing. So, try to understand these numbers from the perspective of what is actually happening. But also remember, Foxconn at the end of the day might employ something like 40,000 Indians. Now, people think that these numbers are massive because, numbers, when you talk about billions and trillions, you lose track of what they actually means. So
Yes.
it's very important to put into perspective on per capita kind of basis. Indian population increases by 40,000 people every single day. I'm not talking about the base population. I'm just talking about the increase in population. About 60,000 babies are born in that country every day. Now compare that number with the total number of people Foxconn will employ in India. It is insignificant. It does not matter. The total FDI in India comes to only $70 billion, which is, something like $50 per year per Indian.
And when you're talking about Foxconn, the operation, that doesn't necessarily mean, and whenever I think Foxconn, I think about Chinese Apple production, but is that producing chips? Is it working on an assembly line? What does that even mean?
So this is another trick that all these media companies are doing. They say Foxconn and Apple will make cell phones in India, and a quarter of cell phones in India. This looks very sexy, very exciting, as if there's a paradigm shift happening in India. The reality is totally different. India is not manufacturing anything. India is merely assembling these iPhones, just assembling. And for those people who don't understand the difference between assembling and manufacturing, assembling is all about putting parts together into one cell phone. Again, that's a political requirement from Apple to be able to legally sell their cell phones in India. But also, Blake, you work in the capital markets and I work in the capital markets. Even if an investment in India is a loss-making investment, companies like Apple have to make an investment there to make it look to the Wall Street that they are doing something and that there's a growth story left in their companies. But that does not change the India story. That does not change the story that Chinese manufacturing is there to stay, and it might move to Vietnam or some other countries, but it is not moving to India.
Jayant, I want to say thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to spend with us here on the Traders Summit. It is a very interesting conversation. I love having this conversation with you, and especially when there's something that's happening about India, I definitely reach out to you as a professional in the field. So thank you for your time, and I'll look forward to having you on the Traders Summit once again.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Blake.
Hey traders, Blake Morrow here. Thanks for stopping by our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also click the bell notifications so you do not miss any of our market-related trading analysis from some of the leading industry experts. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you in the next video.